Okay, hi, I'm Heather from New Jersey, Heather Nodis, and my portions of the project were on Hindu wedding foods and the Pennsylvania Dutch. The Hindu wedding foods were foods that were consistently used within their culture for the weddings were things such as coconuts, brown sugar, cumin, and rice. All of these foods are used as symbolisms for coconuts being a blessing to the marriage, cumin paste and brown sugar representing the bitterness and the sweetness of life, and the rice representing fertility and a symbol of substance. And the rituals within that are associated with the traditions of these foods. Um, Again, the coconuts are a symbol of prosperity. The bride and the father of the bride will hold the coconut and offer it to the husband, and the bride and the groom will hold the betel leaf with the coconut. I'm sorry, the cumin and the brown sugar, and they offer that to one another. Um, and rice is often thrown at the newlyweds, and it's also used as a game between the newlyweds as they might not know each other as well as American couples may. Oftentimes they're just meeting for the first time, and the rice game uh, shows who might be more dominant within the marriage. And I think that that's more or less just a way to make them feel relaxed and more comfortable with one another. And I think that it's really the food that is offered within their culture at the weddings. Again, it's fertility and blessings and so on and so forth. It's traditions and symbolic, and it's kind of inspiring, that they feel so, feel as though these foods are traditions and inspiring, and they believe so heavily in their purpose within their culture. And the Pennsylvania Dutch, they're very prideful people. They reject material items and modern conveniences. The foods that they eat come from their own homegrown gardens. The dairy that they use and the meat come from their farm animals. Um, they are very family oriented. They sit down and have meals together. They get up early to get their work done. They gather on Sundays, not so much for church, but for services. And then they'll go back to someone's home, and everyone brings a dish and they share something like a smorgasbord. And as well as weddings, it's always at someone's home, and everyone brings food and it's laid out for all to share. Um, and that's the, they are pretty much living off the land and what they can grow, and it's kind of cool that they maintain their own food source, and they're prideful of that. And then my field log was on my family tradition, Thanksgiving. It's one of the holidays that we celebrate, not so much in a religious aspect, but it's the one holiday that we always find time to actually attend. And it's both my side of the family as well as my husband's. And my side has always done a traditional meal, turkey, mashed potatoes, so on and so forth. And my husband's has actually always done like Italian cuisines, lasagna, big ziti, meatballs, chicken parm. And so we kind of have brought those traditions together. And so for the past 10 years, that's, what our Thanksgiving has become. It's family and friends that may not have other loved ones, because no one should be alone for such a family-oriented holiday, as far as I'm concerned. Um, so we make these dishes because it's just something that our both sides of our family have grown accustomed to. It's kind of our tradition now to bring both sides of the family together, and I think it gives our children a good foundation in learning that families should get together and make time for one another within busy schedules that everyone has nowadays. Um, so what do you all think about that? Do you have any questions or remarks?
It seems to me like your Thanksgiving rituals, your log on your family's Thanksgiving is a lot like the Dutch in that it's a bringing of people together, in just a community kind of way, as more than like a Hindu is a specific festival. You know, do you agree?
Yes. And as I was listening to yours, Heather, I was thinking about how it related to some of the things that I have, like for actually the things that you have in yours for your like Pennsylvania Dutch one and your the Japanese one that I have, how community comes together. And actually how yours does too for your Thanksgiving dinner, how you said that you wanted to include everyone in it. So I find it similar to the Japanese one that I have where everyone comes together to actually plant the Japanese rice. So it's a more of a community thing.
It was also interesting that the Hindu wedding, not only the food, but the rituals and the games and the everything is symbolic of it. It's very interesting. Probably beautiful to watch too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll go next. My name's Victoria Mejia from Boston, Mass. And I had my menus on Hawaiian poi and the Japanese rice. So the first one was Hawaiian poi. Poi is actually made from taro, which is a Polynesian staple. And it's something that they make out of it. It's kind of like a pudding that they make out of it. And there's a lot of rituals that actually go into making this. For example, the women have to have their hair pulled back, and the men have to wear a loincloth, and you also can't have any physical cuts on your hands. So they use a big wooden board and a stone to pound this taro plant to make it into a pudding-like consistency. So that's what the actual poi is. There's no sugar added to it. It's just the taro mashed with water. It actually ferments and creates kind of like a sourdough type of taste. So a little history on poi is that there was a shortage of sugarcane back in the 20s, so they started planting that instead of the taro plant. Also, they've been using the taro plant fields for development, so they've lost a lot of that. So what the Hawaiian culture is trying to do is bring that back by creating programs that allow residents to plant taro plants in their own backyard. And they also want to try to make a business out of it again by exporting the taro plant and the poi that they make from it. So that's something that's unique. And then the Japanese rice is their number one staple in the sense that they eat it every day. It's not necessarily their most profitable staple because they don't import any of their rice or export any of it. They're consuming all of it themselves. They're planting it, and whatever they have, that's what they're going to use. They actually don't, there's not as many rice plants as there were before. That's not something that they do as much as they did before, but it's something that they do value. Back in a little history from that is in the imperial times, the emperor would actually have his own garden where he would plant his own rice fields and he would mend for them and take care of it. And then also in World War II, they used it as their number one staple to feed their troops. And they also used it as currency. So it's something that they value, like kind of like it's their money. It's what they take pride in. And then the way that they used to grow it back then was it was a wet cultivating type of process that they did, but there wasn't too many water resources at the time. So it ended up being more or less like a community project. So if one person in the community had a water resource, everyone in that area would actually use the same resource. So it was kind of a bonding thing for them. And also what's interesting is that the word for cooked rice is gohan, which is also the prefix for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it's something that they eat all the time, no matter what. which is something unusual for us. We don't think of eating rice for breakfast, but they find a way to eat it for every meal. And they actually do import a lot of food from our country, which is, but what they actually eat is junk food from us. But they, like I said, they refuse to. They have a ban on import of rice right now because they really want to keep it within their own country. They don't try to find a way to get it cheap from us or from other Southeast Asian countries. So I think that's interesting. How both of them want to keep that alive in their culture. Like the Hawaiian one, they want to revive it again and make sure that they don't lose that tradition of creating poi. And then how Japanese culture refuses to even try to find it cheap to support their country. That's something, the way that they grow it, they want to keep it within their culture, their country. So I thought that was interesting. And then for my field research, I actually did it on my father's birthday. My father is Caribbean. He's from Dominican Republic. And it was just within us, within our family. There was only 5 of us. But I thought it was interesting that even though there was only 5 of us, he managed to make tons of food, enough food that we had there and then to take home, and then some. And all the food that he actually made was typical Dominican dishes. I did ask him why he decided to make those type of dishes, and he did say it's because it's the only thing that he has back from his country. He's been here for 30 plus years, but he refuses to really cook American food. He still finds a way to make his own dishes, his own Caribbean flair to everything. So I thought that was interesting. And do you guys have any questions?
I saw a couple of really interesting things about your groups. Like it seems similar, Heather's Thanksgiving and your dad's birthday, in that your Heather's husband takes comfort in his culture, his original. It's sort of like ethnocentrism. Pride in your culture, feeling of superiority. He just gets comfort in that. Heather's husband does in the Italian food. And another thing that was really interesting is, the Japanese using rice as currency, strength for the emperor, I think it was. It's just sort of like the Greek Athens, and what the strength of those people, believe it or not, out of olives. The oil that you use, the olives themselves, that's what put the lights on. And then just as you were discussing the Japanese, that's what came to my head.
Yeah, and it sounds like your 2 portions of the project kind of relate to my Pennsylvania Dutch. They're very focused on the foods that they eat within their culture, as opposed to my Hindu wedding food. I feel like it's more their foods at the wedding are more symbolic.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's it. I didn't think I wanted to add anything else. Trying to think. Maybe I'll think once I hear your stuff, Stanley, too, how it all ties in.
Sure. I'm Stanley Brown from New Hampshire, and my 2 menu groups were actually festivals, and centered around the festival itself as much as, if not more than, the food itself. The Tlingling of Pacific Northwest, it's a potlatch food festival, was actually what I wrote about, and they are. It's actually a social event given by a host, and for weddings, for a man or a woman, a boy or a girl becoming a man or a woman, and it's really a festival to show it symbolizes that person's position in society, and it's with the natural area foods or things that come in that culture itself. It's a bigger culture of the Pacific Northwest itself, and just like Victoria was talking about her dad's birthday party, one of the rituals, or one of the things about these festivals, is the host makes too much food, and they make it a point to make too much food, because that shows that person's stature, wealth in a way, and it also to the point where people take the food home with them and they share it with others, and the word of mouth of how prestigious the person who hosted the festival was. And like for instance, if there was a really big salmon harvest, or they caught a big whale in the or a strong hunt, they would have the festival to show the strength of those people that caught the whale or had the big hunt, or the salmon, and it just showed pride in their culture, pride in their in their native foods, just to be able to show how strong they are. A lot of the symbolism for this group and these festivals is with the teepees that tell the story, the dancing, and the costumes of that group themselves. The other people I wrote about was, and believe it or not, they are sort of similar in a way in that it's a festival, is U.S. football fans tailgating at a tailgate party. It actually is, when you read it, everybody knows what the tailgate, most Americans know what a tailgate party is. But once you read about it and start looking at it at a cultural anthropology type of way, you realize that it has more than just, the obvious. There's just a feeling of neighborly bringing of together, sort of like the potlatch food. You can have a simple tailgate party on the back of a tailgate with a grill, a cooler, and a few people, whereas you can have an elaborate event where people are bringing in their campers and they're setting up tents and they're catering it with, all sorts of flavors. It also, it also incorporates regional things in that, like the Wisconsin Green Bay type of fans would have bratwurst at their tailgates. They would emphasize that. Kansas City is famous for ribs, so the Kansas City Chief fans have, world-renowned ribs at theirs, steaks in the Midwest, things of that nature, in that it gives a way of joining people that would normally not know each other, and suddenly I give a little bit more respect in the subculture of people who are also fans of my team. The symbolism there being, wearing of the uniform for the team, or, a flag of those teams, and things of that nature that would come with a tailgate party. And everything, like I said earlier, the tailgating is just the tailgate of a pickup truck and a grill is how it starts. And then, you can have an elaborate event with catering, tents, games, entertainment, walk down the aisles, talk to people that you would normally never even know, and suddenly you bond with each other over this kind of thing. And it's really a bonding ritual as much as anything else. The field study that I did, the field log, was actually on a New England funeral. And what that was is I didn't necessarily even realize that I was going to write it on this, and the events unfolded, and then as we were discussing, this project itself and starting to read some of the recipe and what are the things we needed, I realized it naturally occurred, the field log for this event. And what I mean by that is, when the event happened, my wife got a message from her stepmother that, her mother was sick, so we couldn't go to an event, and then it just deteriorated further, and the events unraveled in a way where, last rites were given in the evening. So that evening, my wife and my brother-in-law and everybody, sent messages, called, said, "Is there anything we could do? Is there any way we can give you comfort?" And my wife was asked to just go and check to make sure the dog was walked and fed. So as she did that, she also decided to go do some grocery shopping on the way, and she just explained to me, what I'll do is get some basic groceries and make a lasagna, just so that when they got home, they're probably not going to want to stop to get anything to eat. They're not going to want to go grocery shopping, just to give comfort for them, just in case some of the staples will be there at the house when they get home. And it just showed her thoughtfulness and how she did those things, and it was just, it unfolded in that way. The other food event that we had on this log was the actual ceremony. After the ceremony, we got together at the house, the family's house, and just discussing with people that we go back. My wife and I are both in school now, and just discussing how things are going and talking to people. And as the night unfolded, what's new with you? What's new with you? You could tell that food was coming in, and people brought their specialties. And like it was with my wife making a lasagna and going and buying food for them, it was about a comfort. It was a comfort level. And you could tell that the family and participants just took comfort not only in the food itself, the security that is natural from having that food around, but just in the comfort of this aunt's really famous this, or the apple pie that this uncle is just really great at making, and there's comfort in that and how it happened. And that's what I mean is the discussion of the food, the discussion of the people, the way that the seafood chowder that my father-in-law made, and the ritual of firing up the grill and putting ribs on it was just gave comfort to everybody in a tough situation of this is how things normally are, and it gave comfort in it. And that's what I mean by it was all natural. As I'm reading what a log was, it all just happened naturally, and that's what got discussed, and you could tell they had comfort in it. And the aunt would show up, or an uncle would show up with the apple pie, and I never had it before, and everyone's like, oh, hey, he brought the apple pie, and it's like, well, let me try that. And you could tell it gave a little comfort to them and took their minds off a bad situation. You guys have any questions or thoughts on that?
Do you feel like community seems to be a trend in all of this? That, like you said, like the tailgating or how the Japanese create their rice, maybe they don't all know each other like that or get along necessarily, but when it comes to this food, everyone all of a sudden gets together.
Yeah. What I see as a main thing on all cultural analysis is food is the key to all of it. If you want to know about a group, find out what they eat. It tells a lot about people, doesn't it?
It sure does. Yeah, everything seems to play around food, whether it's weddings, funerals, holidays, or just things that the Japanese just want to grow their rice, and Hawaiians with the poi. It's everybody's got specific foods that they eat or harvest and enjoy and kind of entwine into functions.
Everyone seems to take pride in what they do. Like how you said for the funeral, everyone brought their specialty dish. They take pride in this specific food that they created. Or the tailgating, how every certain fan group has their own dish that they like to create. And they're going to take pride in this, and they're going to be known for that.
Yeah. And how food could bond people, believe it or not. Sounds really corny. I just learned it tonight. I've actually bonded with Heather's husband tonight. Never met him. Have no idea who he is. But I grew up in an Italian family too, and having lasagna and meatballs and all those things at a Thanksgiving is, you feel a little bit of pride, like we talked about earlier. Victoria's father with, his ethnic pride in that Dominican food, I felt a little pride myself with you and your husband just having Italian food. And then, like when it gets to funeral food, I'm from Southern Connecticut with an Italian family. The food that shows up at that place is just amazing. I mean, you could feed a whole high school full of kids on a big funeral group.
Yeah, that could be another thing is abundance. Like everyone's going to bring a ton of food.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah. How about differences between them? I guess, with mine were two different kind of cultural aspects. You know, the Hindu wedding, the food was more of a symbolism as opposed to the Pennsylvania Dutch, where they're just kind of prideful and, you know, harvest their own food. They don't want to rely on others. Um, and I guess, you know, the rituals of the Hindu wedding kind of seem to go with Stanley's too, which were, you know, kind of like potlucks, so to speak, and parties and festivals. And then um, the Pennsylvania Dutch kind of went with Victoria's, you know, where it was more about the food itself.
Hmm. I also see the differences in culture versus subculture, like the Tinglet with their potluck festivals. That's the culture of the whole group. In this sense, you know, way back when it was a tribes and different tribes up the coast, you know, from California all the way to Alaska. But in it, that was the culture of that group. Whereas tailgating is just a subculture within a region, you know, like Victoria's area, you know, a Patriot game subculture is different than Boston itself, or
Yeah.
you know, in New Jersey, Heather's husband or you, Heather, I don't know if you're football fans, but you could have a bonding or a rivalry with your neighbors depending on whether you're a Jets, Giants, or Eagles fan, you
Exactly.
know. And there's subcultures outside of the culture itself, and amazingly how that food bonds those people, you know, or the symbols of that green team or blue team could make a difference. You know, obviously it's not, you know, like Protestants and Catholics in Ireland, you know, where they're, but you know, a little bit of a look at them funny type of thing, you know.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that, you know, my Hindu wedding food was more focused around rituals and symbolisms, as I said, and then, you know, the Pennsylvania Dutch, I think, was kind of an odd one as far as our definitions went. I don't really know where they fit in. You know, they're a culture. You know, I don't think they're a subculture, but other than just being a culture, I don't know really where they would fit in with the definition, so to speak.
Yeah, well, that's could be an essay on itself, whether it's a subculture of the state of Pennsylvania or a subculture of the region that they're actually in. You know, a professor would have to answer that question. But that's where it's tough to really draw the line where you are, a culture or a subculture or a group within a group, or, you know.
True.
And then, you know, like we could start just a discussion of like the definitions that we had, you know, enculturation, process of joining a culture. You know, the obvious being when you're a child, you know, you come up. Heather's husband came up in that family. Victoria came up in a Dominican family, and those cultures and whatever religions that came with it, or things that came with it. Victoria's father may speak several languages, or you know how that comes. But then there's also the process of joining that culture and moving to a certain area, or you know, you joke about it earlier, but you know, Heather could suddenly, because her husband and his buddies and the families come over and they keep watching football, suddenly join that culture of wanting to go to an Eagles game or a Giants game or something along those lines. So that, you know, the process of joining the culture isn't just as a baby, but indoctrinating yourself into how those things work.
Yep.
What do you guys think about ethnocentrism?
I really didn't think that any of our groups really fell into that category as being judgmental on anyone else's culture or traditions. Um, you know, nowhere did I feel that they, you know, put anyone else's beliefs down or anything like that. You know, they really just believed in what they practiced. Would you all agree?
Well, I kind of feel like the Japanese didn't buy their rice from other places because of that. They didn't feel like other people's rices was like theirs. They thought theirs was unique. So they were all about the way that they made it and how they prepared it. That's why they don't want to really like buy rice from the U.S. because we use long grain here, or from other type of Southeast Asian countries because they make it differently. They feel like the way that they make it makes it very unique to them.
True. Yeah.
It also seems like a natural process. You know, you get pride in your own group. That's how you grew up. That's who you are.
Sure.
Um, and that's where it was interesting going through the definitions of cultural relativity. You suspend those ethnocentric beliefs. You know, you become an objective observer as you read about it and see, you know, how can an anthropologist read or watch or do a study on cannibals? How can you do that? Well, you pull yourself out of that and say to yourself, well, they grew up where that's okay. Why is it okay? What do they do? What circumstances make that okay for them? And you got to be objective about it. And that's where it was interesting how they made the definitions sort of explain each other.
Yeah. Okay, so then culture, I think, I think we all had, cultural food groups, food ways that we talked about. And symbol, I think that um, Stanley, your symbolisms were more or less, festivities and parties and gatherings and food bringing people together, as well as my Pennsylvania Dutch and um, the symbolism maybe more so with my Hindu wedding and Victoria's poi and Japanese rice. That's those foods are symbolic to them for specific reasons. And then we have the subcultural, um, which again, Pennsylvania Dutch. We can, we got to kind of draw that line somewhere. Um, what all do you think about the subculture? Do you
I
within
think
your groups?
tailgating was a subculture as well, right?
Yeah, I would definitely say so.
Hmm. And it was interesting with Heather's Hindu wedding, you know, that symbolism and rituals sort of molded together in a lot of different ways. Not only was it the coconut itself, but how you hold it and why that means this and why that means that. The games that they do mean these things. I mean, there's probably a lot of rituals and symbolism happening all the time, probably right now that we don't even realize. We're just in this call right here. And it's just such a broad spectrum that it's that's some of the most interesting things on this whole project, really.
Definitely, yeah. Okay, so then I guess next we'll discuss the final report and how we'll go about that.
Hmm.
Does that part actually have to be recorded, or
Yeah, I believe so. It was part of what, and I actually broke it down like what needs to be included in it. Just a discussion of cultural anthropology, definitions of some of the things that we discussed, um, description of how people did their field studies, and then discussions of the commonalities between all the different groups that we talked about. I think what they're really looking for is just a written report on a lot of what we just talked about.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so then see, looks like a collaborative portion of this report. So I guess we'll all write up our own um, field studies and how we went about those.
Mhm.
And then how about I'll take A.
Okay. I'll take B, the definitions of terms and how we all find, you know, how that happens.
Okay.
and I'll do the last part. I'll see if I can make like a chart or a summary of all the commonalities and differences between our cultures that we did.
Hmm.
Okay.
Excellent. And then I think our really motto standard operating procedure with our teams on this project and the earlier ones was deadlines by Friday for submitting our work. We can all review each other's work and then just have another call on Tuesday to discuss it. How does that sound to you guys?
Sounds good.
Very good.
All right. I'm going to stop the broadcast.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Yep.